Happy Friday, everybody. It's late Friday night, so maybe you're not hearing this until Saturday. Then happy Saturday, everybody, and welcome to another handsome episode of your favorite Mad Men podcast, Made Man, where today I watched episode 12 of season 4, Blowing Smoke. 12 episodes into season 4. We only have one left. Next week is the season finale for season 4 of Mad Men and the season finale for season 4 of Made Man. But fear not, we don't take a break. We just roll right into season 5. But that's a couple weeks away. We don't have to worry about that right now. For today, let's talk about episode 12, Blowing Smoke. You know, I love talking about the episode titles, talking about what they mean, and we will get there. But the episode opens up with Dawn in a meeting with one of the people from Heinz. If you remember correctly, Faye did not want to help him by suggesting a client. She thought that would be kind of unethical. But later on, she decided to do it. In the meantime, Dawn did have sex with his secretary. But the important thing, of course, is that Faye came through and set him up with a meeting for Heinz. But it's weird that I guess Heinz has different accounts for different products with different companies. And this guy was like the beans guy. He was beans and something else, but he wasn't ketchup, and he wasn't pickles. You can be funny with pickles, and ketchup seems to be all the rage, but he needs something new with beans. The only problem is he's not really ready to make a move. He was just there to make a meeting. You know, Don's like, I'm sure I can come up with something creative for you. And the guy's like, great. You know, in 6 months we could, things move slow. He goes, how about we do 6 days? And the guy was like, I can't do that. I don't even know if your company's going to be here in 6 months. And Don's like, I do. He's like, I'm glad to hear that. But, and I hope we can do business, but I just can't do it right now. This is all because of Lucky Strike. Lucky Strike took so much away from them. Excuse me. As I said, it's late. Lucky Strike took so much away from them that it not only took away money, but what it did was it damaged reputation. And now all these other companies are like, how much money am I going to invest in this company when I don't even know if it's going to be here in 6 months and I have to do the whole thing again? Wouldn't it be just easier if I just went to this company or this company instead? I mean, I'm sure you're great, but I have to think about myself first. And there's a lot of that seemingly going around. I think I'm going to stick mostly with the in-office stuff, this time around, because and stick there first, and then we'll go outside of the office to the other storyline that was going on simultaneously. We'll get there. We'll get to you, young Sally. We will. And I literally just watched this episode, so if I mess up and I leave something out, I'm going to chalk it up to A, it's late, and B, I just got home from Maine where I went and ran a 5K. So, boom, in your face, I exercised tonight. But that makes me tired. But let's get back to the episode. Back in the office now. All the partners, all the big players in the office are meeting with, I want to say his name is Jim Arrington. I don't know exactly. I recognize the guy because he is Faye's boss, the consultant firm. And he says, you pay me all this money for me to tell you that you just need to get clients. You need to get as much as you can get in as quickly as possible, even little things. But I think what you guys should really aim at is cigarettes. Cigarettes is what you know. You have the team, you have the knowledge, you know how to deal with, I think it was the FTA, he said. You know how to do these things. So I think that's what you should go at. And they're like, well, okay, what do you have in mind? And he says the Marlboro people are looking to have a change. They're creating a new product geared towards women. Is that, I'm like, my first thought is Virginia Slim. Aren't those the women's cigarettes? You know, that they're long and they're supposed to be classy while they kill you. And they're like, great, you know, set up a meeting. And Bert's like, we'll do more listening than speaking. And, you know, they're all excited because, look, it said to start it, this would be a $5 million $5 million client. And all seemed good. Like, at least they're going to get something to get the ball rolling. That seems great. So they're kind of gearing up for that. They're actually very excited about this. Dawn actually meets with Faye, and she talks about how vinegar, I forget exactly what it was. It was the Heinz guys. The Heinz guy was very impressed. But Dawn's like, thank you so much for that, even though it didn't lead to anything. But he's more grateful for this whole cigarette thing. And they are just going to study up and get so perfectly prepared to meet with these tobacco folk. So after a long day of work and stress and dealing with trying to keep his company afloat, Don heads out for the evening. And who does he run into? But his old girlfriend, Midge. And I'm not talking old girlfriend from high school. I'm talking old girlfriend from his marriage. He meets her in the lobby of his hotel. She's there. She says to, have a freelance meeting with a client, but she lost her purse. And they're talking for a bit. And he's like, it's great to see you. What are you doing? He's like, I can't believe I saw you here. I thought I would have seen you over at the Village. She's like, what is Don Draper doing over in the Village? He's like, oh, I live there now. And she was like, oh, basically knowing that his marriage to old Betty Draper, we'll get there with her too, is no more. And he's like, oh, it's great to see you. She's like, maybe you could, come by my house. And he's like, oh, no. And he's actually, I think he's trying to be good to Faye, even though, the Megan thing just, happened. But she's like, oh, you can meet my husband. He's like, really? She goes, oh, no. It's not romantic. We just got married for the bread. I think literally, I didn't know I wasn't sure. Did they mean literally they get a tax refund, or did they literally get married for wedding gifts? I think it actually meant bread. Like, they get bread. I don't know exactly. A starving artist, but she's like, can you at least give me a ride? I don't have my purse. And you can come meet my husband. He's like, okay, I guess so. So he ends up going over to Midge and sees her husband there, and he's like, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. And they pour a drink, and she's like, oh, I'm going to go freshen up. And he goes, we can have dinner. You can stay and have something to eat. Okay, great. She goes into the other room, and Don's looking at her paintings. He's like, yeah, I don't know which one you want to buy. He goes, I'm just kind of hanging out here. She's like, oh, this is it. I knew she'd want you to buy one. That's why she tracked you down. Don's like, what? And that's when he realized he didn't accidentally run into Midge. She didn't lose her purse. She set this whole thing up. She probably wasn't even meeting with a client. She set this whole thing up to try to see Don, to try to get some money off him to buy a painting. So he's like, hey, why don't I cook some dinner? Oh, he opens his wallet. I don't have any money. Midge is like, he's like, well, she lost her purse, and I think he's calling bullshit on that. And he says he's like, do you have anything? Don goes through his wallet. He's like, I can make my dad owned a restaurant. I can make a real good chicken cordon bleu. And Don gives him $10. And the guy's like ungrateful. He's like, $10? Okay, see what we can do. And he leaves. And Don's like, he's kind of interesting. And Midge is like, he's an imbecile. He's going to just take that and put it in his arm. And that's when we realize that this guy is a heroin junkie, heroin addict. And then he sits down and he's like, what's it like? I think Dawn put two and two together, and she goes, oh, okay, this is, she says, it's like drinking 1,000 Jack Daniels or something like that, 1,000 whiskey, while someone's licking your, she used a really dirty word for boobies. I'll just say that. And I use a real childish word, but mine's funnier. So he's like, "Ooh." She goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Why don't you just stop?" She goes, "Don, it's heroin. You can't just stop. I was just hoping you'd buy a painting." But really, she just wants money to put it in her arm, too. And you know what Don likes to do sometimes? Sometimes he just likes to throw money at things to make it go away. So what does he do? He writes her a check for $300 for her painting. And what does she do? She goes, "Oh, Don, what am I going to do with a check?" Because she doesn't have a bank account. She doesn't have anything. She's just a junkie. Now, if you remember, this is the artist girl from all the way back to season 1. Hadn't seen her in years. And, Dawn kind of moved on from her. And she hasn't been doing that well. I'll just say, if you're addicted to heroin, you're not doing that well. I don't know professionally if she's doing anything. She seems to be trying to sell some paintings. And Don is like, fine. He gives her $120 from her, in his wallet. He's like, "That's it. $120. And he's like, "I don't even have money for car fare." She goes, "You can walk through Central Park. You can be a walking sandwich board advertising my paintings." And it was just like Don had this person in his life that he shouldn't have had in the first place because he was married. And look where it got him. It got him in his apartment with her being basically begging for money so she could probably just shoot her right into her arm like her husband did. And Don just kind of said, "Here's the money. Goodbye. Give me." And he took the painting. I was like, "Damn right you take that painting." The next day back at the office, they are ready. All of them ready to present their asses off for this tobacco company. And what happens? But the guy, the consultant, the dude who set up the meeting, who put this whole thing together, came in off the elevator alone. And he's like, "I'm afraid I have some bad news. They canceled the meeting." They canceled the meeting. They put all this effort, all this time, all this hope into this meeting, and this tobacco company canceled it. We find out later, Pete found out that they were never going to be getting the meeting. They just used it to leverage to get another meeting or to kind of, leverage with a different company is what I heard. So they were just pawns the entire time. It turns out that, after the meeting, all the partners got into a room. They kicked out Harry. That was funny. Get out, Mr. Crane. And turns out to kind of keep things going, Lane met with the bank, and they can float them a line of credit to kind of keep payroll going for 6 months. But it seems like not at the current staff capacity. And also, each of the senior partners needs to throw in $100,000, and the junior partners, which I guess are Lane and Pete, need to throw in $50,000. So there's an extra $400,000 there to help make payroll for the next few months. And the senior partners, they do what they got to do. Lane's not great about it, but Pete is like a little freaked out. He just had a baby, and he does not have $50,000 just lying around to give it. But guess what? It's in his freaking contract, and he has to do it. After they talked about the finances and Pete actually came in, complained a little bit about the money, and but that's when he told Don that they were just being leveraged and it wasn't even working. Peggy came in, and she's like, "Why don't we just change the name of the company?" She's like, when you want to change the narrative, you change the conversation, you shift things. And Don's like, "We can't just do that. We can't just change the company. You can't just change the name and hope for the best." Pete ends up going home, and his wife's there, and she's like, "The bank called, talking about something about a loan." And Pete's like, "Oh, they called the house?" She's like, "Yes. I would love to look at this house in the Greenwich or something like that." He's like, "We're not buying a home. He doesn't have a British accent, but he has this delivery. "We're not buying a house, Judy. And then he told her that, we have to each float some money towards the payroll. And Trudy's like, you've given enough to this office. When do you stop? You've given enough to this company. You already threw away everything to get into there. We don't double down, is what she said. He's like, it's in my contract. She goes, well, she's basically like, screw them. You're not giving. She said, I forbid you from giving money. There's $22,000 they have in the bank. And that would be nice. And then there's money that was set aside for the baby that he's like, they're not touching that. That's for the baby. And is it Tammy? I think is the daughter's name, which is pretty cool because that's my wife's name. And they said, she was like, I forbid you from giving that money. And he's like, you cannot forbid me from that. Meanwhile, Don's goes home. He just wants to have a drink. He looks at that friggin' painting. He's had quite the day because he thought he was having a big meeting, which would have led to bigger meetings and better meetings and more meetings, but it was shit. He got nothing. So he goes home. He's about to throw that painting out. I think he was angry about what he dealt with. He was angry with Midge. He's about to throw that thing out, and he's like, wait a second. Let me just look at it. He kind of got caught in its gaze, and he put it down on his couch. He sat across from it, drinking, just looking at it. Then he went over to his desk, his little desk he has, took out his notebook where he was kind of keeping a journal, and I loved this moment, I have to say. I loved it. Whatever happens, I loved it. He rips out everything that he's written in that little notepad. He had that notepad. He's been keeping notes, almost like a memoir. Rips it all out, throws it all away, and starts fresh. And he starts talking about how, for years, it was why I quit tobacco while he's smoking. And he's like, for years, my advertising agency worked with Lucky Strike, or I don't know if he said that. I think he said the name. For years, we worked with this tobacco company, and they have, it's a company that gets people sick, makes people angry. It never changes. People just buy it and consume it. And I am telling you that I am no longer, my company is no longer working with tobacco companies. And what did he do with that letter? He typed it up and he bought an ad, a full page ad in the New York Times, basically advertising. He said, here's a list of all the companies you can go to if you're to big tobacco, but you're not going to come to us. And I thought that was big, huge brass balls. Then he goes for a swim. He comes into work and people are just staring him down because this was in the New York friggin' Times. You might as well put it on the front page of Facebook in today's world. That is huge. And people are kind of looking at him, snickering, and like just kind of like eyeing him. He's like, good morning. And the partners are pissed. They're pissed that he went around their back. They're pissed that they think no one's going to touch them now, because if you're going to burn clients like this. And Don was just like, he was proud. He stood by what he did. He was basically saying, we stand for something. You want to come stand with us? You can, if you want to find us, you know where to find us. And, they're complaining, you don't do this behind our back. You didn't even let us put our name on it. So it looks like you're going rogue. Bert's like, I don't want to work here anymore. Give me my shoes. When he wants his shoes, it means he's going to leave and never come back, which, I don't know what he does anyway. And all of a sudden, Megan comes in. She goes, Don, there's a phone call from Senator Kennedy's office. And he gets a phone call. He's like, Senator. And then you get the worst Robert F. Kennedy impression ever. And my first thought was, oh my God, they're really doing this? This is how they're going to say RFK sounded. And he's like, hey, you did very good with tobacco. And I was wondering if you could also, do you still work with Clearasil or whatever the company was? I forget. He said something else. And it turns out that it was just that rival company just pranking him. And he was like, thank you for putting an ad for us in the paper. This has worked out great. And they're all happy and they're all excited. And Don just hangs up and everyone's pissed at him. So everyone's pissed at him. And the partners are all pissed at him. But he stands by what he did. He's proud of what he did. He knows why he did it. And he thinks it'll work. I think it'll work too. But the problem is also, then Roger's like, well, at least Lucky Strike's not the reason this company's going down now. So he felt good that he wasn't the reason. And he kind of just blew it off, had a drink, and said, I need to go learn the names of people I have to go fire. And Dawn brings in Peggy first, and she just has this look of dread. And he closes the door, and she goes, are we going under? Dawn's like, nope. And she's like, he goes, who can you live without? And she just had this look of relief like, oh, thank God. She gives him some names, and that means that Dawn's got to fire these guys. And she said, he said, and she's like, oh, the letter. I thought you didn't go for those kind of shenanigans, because she's the one who suggested changing the name. And Dawn just gave her a look like, I did what I did. Megan came in and later and apologized for the Robert F. Kennedy and said, just for what it's worth, I thought the letter was great, and you stood for something. And Dawn's like, well, that's not really what it was about. She goes, well, whatever it was about, the reason you did it, you did something. I understand what you did, but I still think it was a good idea. And he's like, thank you. I'm glad that I slept with you last week. He didn't say that. It's just weird that when she said to him, I don't want this, I'm not going to argue, I'm not going to make a big deal about this the next day, I'm not going to cry in your office. She meant it. I mean, she's cool as a cucumber. She doesn't give a shit that her and Dawn are just strictly on a professional level. Now, because of the whole brouhaha with the tobacco company and the consultant company no longer had to resign from Sterling Cooper Draper Price, which means Faye no longer works with them. Which Peggy actually took heart. She goes, I really admire you. I would love to get a drink with you sometime. I feel bad that I'm not going to see you again. The way you work, the way people respect you, it's so hard, and you do it so well. And she was like, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I don't think it's the last we're going to see Faye. She went to Dawn's office to explain this and said, but now we don't have to talk work. We can do whatever we want now. So I want to get dinner with you tonight at 8:00. And Dawn's like, all right. And she says, have your girl set it up. And I wondered if that was some sort of dig. Some sort of like, make sure that girl knows that you have a girlfriend. And that girlfriend is me. I kind of think that was. I kind of do, because when she met her at the office, her and Dawn and Megan were walking down the hall together. Nothing, it was all completely normal, but just something about that line, had your girl set it up, to me sounded like she was saying, let that girl know that I'm here to go out with you. I'm your girlfriend. Now, before they started firing people, something good did happen. They went into a meeting and they talked. Oh, they went into a meeting and Joan's like, I think that me and Dawn and Roger should do the firing, let people know. And Lane's like, please don't sympathetically change their severance. In other words, if they're going to cry, you don't want to give them more money. And Roger's like, well, something good did happen. We got a call from the American Cancer Society. Don's like, okay, yeah, were they pranking you? He goes, no, I thought they really were pranking me, but turns out they want to work with us to do an anti-smoking campaign. And Don's like, well, that's something. And Pete's like, yeah, great. Working, for a public figure for no money. He goes, it's great publicity. And Ken was like, there's a lot of influential people on that board. So we see a little smidge, not midge, we see a little smidge, a little sliver of what possibly could be a good thing that Don's letter led to. Maybe there are some virtuous companies out there that see this and say, wow, that's the type of company I want to work with. Clearly, that was Don's idea. I think it's going to work out. I think that it's going to mean something, and I can't wait to see if it's a big part of Season 5 or if we learn something more in the next and final episode of Season 4. But then they go off to go fire people, and before they do, Pete stopped Lane and said, listen, I know you said end of work today for that money to keep everything afloat. I don't have it. Maybe I could have a loan against future earnings, future bonuses. And Lane's like, oh, I didn't, don't worry about it. Dawn paid your share. And I think that was pretty good, Lane. I think I did all right. Pete's like, he did? Perhaps you weren't supposed to know that. No, that wasn't as good. And he looks out. He sees Don kind of dealing with somebody that he needs to bring into fire. Little Danny. Remember the little cousin, the guy who got the job because he knew somebody? Well, he's no longer there. By the way, that guy, I was like, oh, I wonder what he's doing now. Oh, he's writing and producing on Empire. He's won Emmys. There's a picture of him with Emmys. He might be writing the new Dan Brown movie. I mean, this guy is working and worked a lot and is very successful. So the fact that he got fired from Sterling Cooper Draper Prize that day, he made out all right. But Pete comes out, looks over at Don. Don looks at him, and he just gives a little smile and a nod with a drink, I know what you did. Thank you. I'm not going to make a big deal of it because you obviously didn't even want me to know. So I thought that was a nice moment. And then Don goes in and fires folks. And that is how the episode ends. Don bringing someone in to fire them. Some guy named Billy, who I may have seen before. I feel like this is the first time I've ever seen him, and it's his last day. Sorry, Billy. But let me tell you something. That was not the only thing that happened in this episode. I said I was going to stay in the office, but I stayed with Don. Don was in the office. Don met with Midge. Don gave her money to do more heroin. Don took her painting. Her painting seemed to inspire him. He took that inspiration, wrote a letter, wrote an ad. The ad may or may not backfire, may or may not actually work. But the guys are pissed off that he did it in the first place. But he did it, and he's happy he did it. I am too, damn it. But there is another story that happened in this episode that I haven't touched at all. And it focuses around, it focuses around Sally Draper. But Betty Draper's also there. So Betty's getting dinner made for Sally and Bobby and little, I want to say, it's not Henry. There's enough Henrys. It was whatever the granddad's name was. Jerry? No, that's not right. I don't remember. But he's getting dinner, and the kid's already grown up. I mean, he's going to be driving soon. He looks so big. Getting dinner ready is, and they're all having a hot dog. And Sally's like, why don't we ever eat dinner with Henry? The stepdad. And Betty's like, well, he gets home later. He works later, and I don't want you guys to have to wait. So he goes, I don't mind waiting. You can feed Bobby and the baby, and I can wait and have dinner with you guys. And Sally and Betty's like, oh, you want to have dinner with me and your stepdad? She has a smile on her face, like, that'd be wonderful. Later we cut to Sally and her young little beau. I don't remember this kid's name. But if you remember, season 1, he's the divorcee's, even though Betty's also a divorcee, but he was the scandalous divorcee's son. The same son that asked Betty for hair, and Betty gave it to him. That was the first sign that Betty is a crazy person. And now we see him. He's a little older, a little bulkier. He's wearing a football uniform. Probably came right from football practice. And him and Sally seem to hang out in this abandoned lot. And they're just kind of sitting there, hanging out. He's like, they're talking, and he's saying like, oh, they talk about going to a psychiatrist. And the kid's like, oh, it's really easy to trick psychiatrists. I'm like, oh my God, that's what psychotic people say. Don't do it. I want to be like, and then at the end of the episode, he's like, what's your name? Oh, my name is, and he says some crazy famous serial killer's name. And he also said, did you do, oh, and he's like, I forget, she was like, I like my psychiatrist. She's nice to me. And she doesn't lie to her, like something like that. And he was like, he said something to her like, hey, did you, you know, trick your mom, like, or by just agreeing with her? So when Sally was being nice to Betty before about wanting to have dinner with Henry, I think she was just being manipulative, just trying to do that to get on Betty's good side, because then she can kind of run off and hang out with her boyfriend. I mean, they don't do anything. They're not kissing or anything. They just kind of hang out a lot. And she's like, I'll promise you my Fritos. Later we see Sally with her secretary. Later we see Sally with her psychiatrist. And they're playing Go Fish, right? It's Go Fish. And Sally says something weird like, I hate sevens. And I was trying to figure out, why does she hate sevens? Did we ever see that before? Did something happen with a seven? I couldn't put two and two together, and the psychiatrist is like, why? She goes, I just do. And then the doctor is like, I think it's really good how much you've been progressing and how good you've been doing when you're angry at your mother. It almost seemed like the doctor was saying, keep it in. And I was like, is that the right thing to do? And she's like, she doesn't know when I'm angry. Even though I'm still angry, she doesn't know it. And she was kind of blowing it off like, she, again, just kind of putting on face for her mother, manipulating her, just to kind of not have to deal with her. Because, again, who wants to deal with Betty Draper, right? But the psychiatrist thinks she's doing really good and is like, I think we can cut back to once a month now. And I don't even think Sally, she's like, then you can have more time to do this and do that and do this with your friends. I don't even think Sally was into that. She was like, oh, I think she likes hanging out with this woman. She likes having an adult that she respects. And you know who else likes it? Betty. First of all, she doesn't want to have to deal with her daughter. Second of all, she likes going to this woman and talking to her about her issues. Basically, her own special psychiatrist, but not an actual psychiatrist. The woman's like, now that we're coming back, I could recommend you to one of my friends. One of my colleagues that I respect, and she's like, I don't need a psychiatrist. She goes, I just want to keep talking to you about Sally's progress, even though really it's a lot more than that. And I'll go with whatever you recommend, but I hope that we can still use that time to discuss it. The doctor's like, of course you can. I'll deal with you and your daughter. That's no weird thing there, because Betty, you are in denial that you need to see a psychiatrist. Denial. Well, then we see another spot where Sally and the boy, I can't remember his name, are hanging out. Last time we saw him, he was selling Christmas trees. But, or was he messing up their house? That was the same episode. I think. And so now they're in that lot again, and the kid just drinks a Coke and throws the glass because who cares about littering? And Sally's talking about a dream where she was flying, and he's like, oh, I had dreams where I fly too, and sometimes you feel like you're swimming. And Sally's like, it's weird, I felt like I was going to heaven. Oh my God, I'm so tired. I felt like I was going to heaven, but I don't, which is weird because I don't believe in God. I don't believe in that. The kid's like, you don't? What's going to happen when you die? She goes, I don't really think about it. I don't like to think about forever. I just don't like that it's forever. I don't like to... And then she talked about the Land O'Lakes butter, with the woman's, and the Land O'Lakes butter was holding a box of the woman holding a Land O'Lakes butter on a box of a woman holding a Land O'Lakes butter. And he's like, oh, I never thought about that until now. Thanks. And they kind of, split up again to go their separate ways. They just like to hang out and talk, which guess what? Is pretty healthy. But you know what, Sally? The first time you meet him in the lot, fine. The second time you meet them in the lot, you have a real interesting talk about life and death. And the third time you meet him in the lot, oh, guess who's driving by? Oh, Betty Francis. That's right. I call her by her proper name, Betty Francis. Driving in her car with her cigarette, with her sunglasses on. Oh, I just despise her. And, she sees Sally going in the lot with that boy. She gets out of her car, runs over, yells at her. Says, you can't do that. I forbid you from seeing this boy. And he just takes one look at Betty and drops the 2 Coke cans and just runs off. And she's like, I don't want you to see my daughter anymore. You stay away from her. And Sally's like, that's not right. And she brings him home and goes, he's not a good kid. She goes, you don't know that? She goes, I know him better than you do. And Sally's like, you don't know him at all. And Betty just kind of gives her this look. Meh. And she runs upstairs and is crying. And oh no, not yet. She, Betty just pissed her. But guess what? Betty doesn't know this kid. He met her once. They hung out once a couple of years ago. Betty babysat, gave the kid her hair because she's a creep. They talked again one time when he was in a car, and Betty walked up again, talking to him like they are equals because she is an equal to a child, and which is again proof because she's going to a child psychiatrist. Everything I am telling you is going to pan out. In the end, Betty is a child. But she, they have dinner, and Betty is, Sally's not really excited about eating, it seems like, and, Henry comes home. He's like, I came home early to have dinner with my family, and to have dinner with everybody. And, she's like, oh, she goes, you can wait. He goes, no, a family dinner. I wasn't, it's more like this. It's more like a family dinner for my family. And Betty's getting everything together, and she goes, a lot of riffraff in this neighborhood. I think it's time we sell this home and move. And he's like, oh, that's a great idea. Look, there's a nice, he wants to get the hell out of Dawn's house. He goes, why don't we have that place in Rye? And Bobby's like, Rye? Isn't that where Funland is or whatever it's called? And Sally's like, what? Runs upstairs, cries in her sleep, holding the little handle that the kid left when he trashed their house and he didn't trash her room. And she's all sad because she's not going to have her boyfriend anymore. But Sally's like, oh, she'll get over it. Don't worry about it. And I can't believe I finished. I should have started with this. I actually finished this episode talking about Betty and Sally and Sally's boyfriend, Sally's psychiatrist, Henry, Bobby. I mean, that was it happened. It was character progression. Pretty soon I feel like we're going to see Sally Draper out-mature Betty Draper. I feel like she might already be there. The little actress is really good. You can see they have something good there. And she's smarter than Betty. She's more mature than Betty. And I will stick by that till the end of time. But look, the really important stuff here is the stuff that happened at Sterling, Cooper, Draper, Perez. They thought they had the cigarettes, but that ain't nice. Faye is gone. They don't need a consultant. And I can't believe I tried to rhyme something with consultant. So, where do we go from here? Where does Sterling Cooper Draper Price go? And is Cooper out? He walked by the group of people in the creative, and he's like, it was nice working with you. And they were like, him too? And it started with him? Like someone made a joke that he got fired because he's walking out with his box and his shoes. Because he's weird. Is he really gone? I can't imagine he's gone. He's just pissed about Don's ad, which I think is going to work wonders. At least I hope it is. I hope they start getting calls in the next episode. The last episode of Season 4 for Mad Men and for Made Man. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to get this episode up before midnight. Otherwise, it's not Friday anymore. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Really, just you can find me on Twitter at MadeManPod, fansnotexperts.com/MadeMan. We are part of the Fans Not Experts podcasting network. If you go to Fans Not Experts, there are a bunch of podcasts on there. And this is the most handsome of them all, right? I also do one for Stranger Things. If you're a Stranger Things fan, check that out. The first episode of Season 3 just went live today. So if you're interested, you can find it at fansnotexperts.com. Listen, subscribe. But that's Stranger Things. This is Mad Men. The only connection there is Faye, because she's Mrs. Wheeler. And it's cool to see her in both things. Very different character. And now I'm talking with a cool voice. Is it my voice? Is it my announcer voice towards the end? I think it is. What if I could do a whole podcast like this? That would be fun. And tiring. My friends, I want to thank you. Thank you for coming along with me on this adventure. This adventure that sees Sally getting a boyfriend? A boyfriend that likes to trick psychiatrists. One that Betty does not approve of, so much to the point where she wants to move away. In the meantime, Don meets his old girlfriend just to give her heroin money. But that painting seemed to inspire him. To write a letter, to make an ad, to screw over Big Tobacco, and maybe get in with the Cancer Society. Maybe. But let me tell you something. We're going to find out more next Friday. But until then, I want to thank you as I continue this journey to become a made man.
Fans not experts.